Okay.
Okay, so it's a huge pleasure to have you, Fabiola, here. I'm very, very grateful for you for offering this time. I know you are very busy and you have many things to do. So I'm really grateful for you offering this time for I think most of us are from Croatia, some from Bosnia, some from maybe Serbia, so from our region of Balkan. So
It's a pleasure also for me. So thank you for inviting me.
So I welcome you in this online space we share. We said that I will have a short introduction of you.
Okay.
And please say anything else what you wish to add. I know you are a clinical psychologist and also provisional supervisor and teacher intersection analysis with great experience in working with adolescents, youth, adults, both in individual and group setting.
Yes.
And I know that you work mostly in South Italy when we are talking about face-to-face, but also you're very open for online working, both for teaching and supervision. So I know you have many groups, both supervision and teaching groups, and as well as us for this night.
Okay.
Yeah, and I know it is very important for you to mention that you have a second degree, or you're going to have a second degree in philosophy and ethics. You're achieving that. And you have a general interest in ethics.
Yes.
So it's your big passion.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I think that you have said what that you have said the main information about me.
Maybe just to add one, maybe for some could be interesting information about you, and that is that you are particularly interested in psychoanalysis and psychodynamic intersection analysis. So it might be important for some people to know that information about you too.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So, can I start?
Sure.
So, a general question for you. Thank you for coming, and thank you for showing interest in this topic that is really close to me. I feel passionate about working with adolescents. I feel working with adolescents is really stimulating, sometimes more than working with adults. And I want to ask a general question, so feel free to answer also through the chat. So Tatiana, you will help me in reading the chat or saying that there are some questions.
Yes.
Why have you decided to join this webinar on adolescence? Feel free. Do you work with adolescents, or is just a general interest? Or Tatiana, why have you proposed me to organize a webinar on adolescence?
Thank you, Fabiola. You can always use me as a joker. Well, I know that some of my students that I train do work with adolescents, and that is the population I don't work with. So I see a big benefit for them to learn from somebody, especially to learn from somebody who really loves working with this population. That is one reason. And another reason that is for like my students, but another reason is also for general public and general colleagues who are not my students, which are many of them also here present. I assume some of them might come because after the COVID, many adolescents have more severe symptoms and problems than they used to have it. So statistics and the need for working with adolescents is absolutely far greater than it ever was before. So that was my two main reasons.
Yes.
Why.
Okay, I think that there's something in the chat. Something that
Exactly.
Yes.
Do you want me to read it?
Yes, because otherwise I can lose time. Yes.
Sure. So Martina shares that she works as a counselor who does the work with adolescent. Eva is also doing very similar program, and Tanya as well. Andrea says that she wants to learn something new, which is great. Dea is also working as a school psychologist. Barbara is also interested in a general interest in professional curiosity as a psychologist and as a mother, which is great.
Yes.
And Tatiana shares with us that it is because sometimes she is working with adolescents and she wants to learn more about this topic. It is a very challenging time for them.
Okay.
And Amalia says that she hopes that she will find some new perspective about the corner contract.
Okay.
And I wrote something else. I hope I will find something which will help me to break my resistance regarding working with this kind of with this group of clients. And this is connected to the three-corner contract and the parents of the adolescents.
The parents.
The parents, yes.
Okay. So this will be, that this will be an introduction on working with adolescents. And in this workshop, I want to present you a particular side of working with adolescents, because working with adolescents, it's not like working with adults. There's a complexity. We hope, as a psychologist, counselors, and professional, we manage complexity. But when working with adolescents, we have a huge complexity, more than other situations. So, in my opinion, according to my experience, to work in an effective way, we have to keep in our mind this complexity. And this evening, I will show you something of this through some concepts in TA, but not only in TA. Okay, so working with adolescents, it's according to my experience and my interest, is very interesting and stimulating, but also it requires you an effort. As a therapist, there's a big commitment in working with this topic, because you are not alone in your office. You are not alone. Even if you are working with a client that is one client in front of you, you're not alone. And if you think that you are alone, this could be a big mistake in working with this topic, because something has changed also after pandemic. Many teenagers are suffering, and they show big suffering, like self-harming or depression or anxiety disorders. So there's a big request for help, but also in this request, in this way, there's something changed after pandemic, and I will show you something that has changed. So feel free to interrupt me if you need to ask questions verbally or through the chat. Tatiana will help me saying that there's a question or a comment. I'm very I care a lot about interaction, so I'm here to show my experience and to give you something that is that belongs to my professional world. But please feel free to share and to contribute with your experience or with your curiosity. Okay, we will have about 1 hour. I will leave 10 minutes at the end for comments or for sharings or for whatever you need. And now I start with the sharing. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So let's start with a definition. When working with adolescents, if you are interested in working with adolescents, as a therapist, as a counselor, or as a professional, you need to catch information from other theoretical model than TA, because unfortunately in TA there's too little. And psychoanalysis has developed many concepts and many articles about adolescence. In Italy, we have Dina Vallino, that is a psychoanalyst working with children and adolescents. Of course, we have in TA Dolores Monaripoda, that has won the Eric Berne Award for working with children. But I think that we can obtain information also looking at the psychoanalytic model. In particular, one of the main authors in the world that has written something on adolescence is François Dolto, that is a French author. Now she's died, but she has written many books and many articles about adolescence. So I like to show this definition from François Dolto. So, what is adolescence? A clear word, it's a mutation phase. So, François Dolto says, equally, this mutation phase, it's equally fundamental for a teenager as the birth or the first 15 days of life. So, François Dolto underlines how important is this phase, this mutation and change phase. The adolescent goes on a transformation on which he can or she can do nothing. So it's something that the adolescents, the boy or the youth, must interface and must manage. The adolescent stage lasts according to the projections that young people receive from adults, and depending on the exploration limits that society imposes on him or her. So this is another important point, because in this clause, the author François Dolto underlines how important are others for an adolescent, a teenager, others, in particular adults. So you can easily understand how important it is for a therapist to keep in his mind, how important it is to involve the adult around adolescents in the process. Otherwise, we can devaluate an important piece of his or her life without achieving an effective treatment. And adults slope to the young man, the man or boy, to face responsibility. Any questions up to now? No?
No, not
Okay.
for now.
Now, here is a summary of keywords around adolescence, and you can easily see how many words we can find to describe adolescence. We have many words: transitions, adolescence, psychological, education, childhood. And there's another important journal on adolescence and youth, that is the International Review of Adolescence and Youth, that has the same author. I discovered it, the same that has the same editor of our transactional analysis journal, the Taylor and Francis group. So if you want, you can find articles and writings about adolescence in consulting this editor. So when we work with adolescents, we work constantly with mutation, as Françoise Dolto said, and with the change. So we have to consider that the instability, so the liability of the internal world, emotional lability, and highly variable number of people around the adolescent are parts of the working process. That is so important to understand that working with adolescents is not like working with adults. Okay, so confusion, instability are part of the process, and we have to manage this. Otherwise, as a therapist, as a school psychologist, as a counselor, we devaluate an important part of the process. Any questions? When I say this, when I run workshop or webinar on adolescents, when I underline this part, many people get scared. Yes. Confusion and instability are a scary part of the process. But if we want to work with adolescents, we need to consider all this and to preview this. So let's see a difference when working with adolescents from different settings. There's chat.
Yes, great. Thank you, Martina. So she asks, what does that mean in practice? Can you give an example for, I think it goes back to confusion, instability. So what that means in practice concretely. Okay, Martina, I'm glad I got the question right.
Okay. Thank you for this question. Probably you will understand better then later in the presentation. But when you're working with an adolescent, you have to consider that you are not facing with a stable personality. because this is an ongoing process, an evolutionary process for the adolescents. So instability in terms of emotionally speaking, for example, it's quite normal to find different sides of moods in an adolescence. Okay, so if you work with an adolescent, you have to consider that also talking through TA, you are not facing with a well-defined ego states. You are, and we will see it during this presentation, you are facing with a structure that is building. So there's an ongoing process behind the adolescence. So you can find liability and instability, also above all emotionally speaking. I don't know if I answered.
Martina is not saying anything.
There's
Yes, okay. She responds now. Thank you. Thank you, Martina.
Okay. There are other questions?
No, not for now. I hope there will be, but not for now.
Okay. So let's focus, because the main goal of this webinar is to show how working with adolescents and with the complexity around this target, I want to show the difference, briefly, a difference when in comparison with other settings. For example, working with children. There's I think a big difference that when you work with the children, the request for an help and the treatment frequently comes from parents or educators or teachers who evaluate emotional, behavioral, cognitive processes. Okay? Many times there are parents that ask for an help and try to find a professional. It's really unuseful to find a child that asks for an help. And when working with adults, the request for an help comes normally from the individual, from the person who feels a need for an help. Let's see what could happen with the adolescent. And this is something that, according to my experience, happens frequently, really frequently after pandemic. That a request comes from the adolescent himself or herself. Sometimes I had the experience, I received phone calls or request emails directly from adolescents. And of course, you have to pass through parents because there's legal aspects. But many times, adolescents ask for an help directly. So, can you see the difference between working with children, working with an adult, and working with an adolescent from this point of view? The point of view of the request for an help. It's a question for you.
Adolescent has the ability to become aware that something doesn't work for him or her. She or he has a problem, and he or she can do something, can have the initiative to ask for help, to ask an professional to a specialist for help. And adolescent doesn't have the legal context to continue this service, to work with a specialist without the parents to be
permissions.
Without the permission.
Yes, exactly. So when you work with children, you have a request from the parents or from teachers or from the educators. When you work with adults, you have the direct person. When you work with adolescents, you have an individual request that is from the adolescent, but the adolescent is not alone. And not many times, it could happen that parents disagree with this idea of the adolescents. I have found this. So an adolescent that was searching for an help, and the parents or one of the parents disagreed about this idea, devaluating is suffering, of course. There are other ways to obtain a permission. For example, in Italy, if you show that an adolescent needs some help, a professional help, you can ask to the tribunal for receive a legal request. Of course, is something very demanding a process. Okay.
We have few comments.
Yes.
Thea says that the difference is in motivation and the need. Motivation and need.
Yes.
And Doris asks, what do we do with instability? Do we nurture it or try to reduce it? If I think that stability is like one of the vital aspects of dealing with stress.
Okay. One of the main goal when working with adolescents is helping our client to achieve a self-regulation, because they need to learn this. So instability is a part of the process, but we have to work with the instability to achieve a better stability, emotionally speaking. Otherwise, instability can be the main reason, for example, for dangerous behaviors in adolescence. Okay, other questions? Did I answer?
No?
Okay.
Yes, that's all for now.
What happens when we receive a request for an help from an adolescent? We have to read the psychological level of this request, because many times in this period of mutation, of change, the adolescent wants to find another parental figure in his life. And it doesn't mean that he wants to substitute the real parent. He wants to integrate another person in his internal world. Look at this. In the first diagram, we have the adolescents. I have drawn the diagram of the adolescent. you can see how the boundaries of the ego state are not well defined. Because we are talking about, as I said before, we are talking about an ongoing process of definition. So apparently we have an adult ego state, a parent ego state, and A2, P2. But when an adolescent is suffering, we have a big activation of the child ego state with the archaic part of the child ego state. We have the child, we work with the child ego state of the adolescent. So when we receive a request from an adolescent, apparently, from a social point of view, we have an adult request, give me a name. But from an ulterior point of view, because this is an ulterior transaction, we have the request to become another parental figure. This is not a problem because it's normal. We have, as a therapist, be aware of these dynamics. Otherwise, we can devaluate something. So now a question for you. Why, in your opinion, is so important to analyze these transactions, these ulterior transactions between a therapist and a client? Why is not obvious? What could be the risk if a therapist evaluates this dynamic? Devaluates or doesn't see this dynamic in deep, this transaction. No?
Maybe I can offer some. Okay, Martina is saying something.
Yes. Don't be shy. Be brave.
What is the possible alternative view of the therapist? She asks. What is the possible alternative view of the therapist?
The question is not clear. Can you say?
Well, I'll try to, do you hear me?
Yes, please.
I'll try to explain. My kids are around, so
Yeah, don't worry.
That's why I'm not using microphone often. You said, what if the therapist devalues this? I'm not a transactional. I'm not very.
Oh, okay.
I know basics, but I am not into it so much. What could be the alternative thing that a therapist could think? You know, if you don't, if you do not take, if you do not bear in mind this transaction, what could you bear in? What else could you bear in mind, or do you know what would be some alternative approach when you approach this situation?
Okay. So
I don't know if
Yes, I think that I have understood. So this is, of course, a strictly TA vision, but let's think about evolutionary needs. Which are the evolutionary needs for an adolescent? He needs an adolescent that asks for an help, probably has a difficulty, has a suffering, has a problem. So there's a need for a self-regulation of an emotional suffering, for example, or for behaviors. So, of course, the adolescent is searching for a figure, a point, a person that can help him in regulating himself or herself. So I think that you can think about the evolutionary needs, which is the hidden request of the adolescents, in the adolescents. I don't know if I have clarified your doubts. No?
Okay. Is that a question for me or?
Yes. Did I answer? Did I clarify, or you're not satisfied?
No. Well, I am processing, so I will continue to listen.
Okay.
And
Okay.
maybe
Okay.
I'll have some more questions. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Other questions?
Yes, Doris comments like that we can easily know what the adolescents needs. So returning to your question, that was her thinking.
Okay. Yes, of course. Thank you.
Yeah. And Amalia also wrote maybe a confirmation that the parental figure is not available.
It could be. I would say it could be, but I'm not sure that there's a not available parents behind the adolescent. Probably there's needs. Okay, we will see it later. Let's focus on this dynamic. What this request for a parental figure could imply. An exclusive relationship request. So to have an exclusive relationship with the therapist. This could be the fantasy of the adolescent, above all when the real parents are not able to contain their suffering. We could interface as a therapist with a request for confidentiality, even in case of dangerous behaviors. That is a slippery ground. Adolescents can expect that we will maintain a professional confidentiality in every case, and this is also an ethical point. Adolescents can develop an expectation of alliance against or excluding someone. This happens really very often when there's a conflict with the family, with the parents. So I can create something with the therapist to exclude my parents. Another dangerous point. And the last fantasy is that the therapist can become the magical person who can save and help him in difficulties. For example, at school. Many times I have received requests to produce certifications, medical certifications to help clients with the schools, for example, to justify absence at school, or to justify difficulties in having tests. And okay, so be careful, because how this could be a banana a slippery ground, because when we work with adolescents, we are not alone in our office. We are not alone. And if we think to be alone, and then we can have our wonderful work in our office only with the client, without considering the world around the adolescents, we can fail. We surely fail. Why? Because we work in a world of complexity. Look at this. We have parents. There's a therapist that we can be. There's a school, probably. Think about adolescents that have problems with school. I found many problems, above all after pandemic, for example, in attending school, fear of attending regularly school, difficulties in relate to other students, to teachers. So really, the school can be another character of this process. We could face around the adolescent, we could face with a boyfriend or a girlfriend that has an influence on our client. We have to consider this. There's also the friends, the group of friends that can influence the boy or the girl. And we can have sisters or brothers that are part of this process. So, can you see that we are not alone in our office? Is it clear how complex is this work? Any questions? Any comments? How do you feel? Scared?
I feel that it's very similar also for kids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Maybe not everything is the same.
Mm-hmm.
All the systems or persons the kid is connected to, but in a way it is also similar.
It could be, but consider that we are talking about apparently we are talking about a personality structure that is ongoing. So we have the three ego states apparently well defined, but we don't really, in reality, we don't have these three ego states with defined boundaries. So, of course, when working with children, we have these many people around, but with a different influence, I think. When working with children, you don't have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and sometimes you don't have the group of friends like an adolescent, and probably you don't have a conflict, or you could have a conflict with parents, but not like the intensity that could color the adolescent world. I have seen big conflicts and free degrees of game between the adolescent and parents and in the family. I think that there are differences. Other questions you have or comments?
Barbara comment in chat. She says regarding working with complexity, taking into the account client systems, and we as psychotherapists become the part of his or her system.
Yes, yes, of course.
And Amalia comments, because of the instability of adolescents, the influence from her systems can have more strong impact on the therapeutic work.
Of course, this is another big difference, I think, than working with children. Okay. So, how can we manage it? We have many things to consider. First of all, we have to keep in our mind this complexity. This is the first point, to maintain in our mind this complexity. And then trying to find in theories some tools that can help us in the process. Remember that theories are different. We have many theories, many theoretical theories. So theories, it's a way to understand reality and to read reality. So if you find a theory that can help you to work and to read reality, use it. I think that in TA, we have a useful, interesting, and complex tool, theoretical and practical tool, that is the three-cornered contract by English. Let's see the contract. Okay, let's see this first version. You can see the three corners. We have the therapist, we have the client, and we have parents. Why is so important this model? Because you can see and put in evidence which is the commitment of every corners in the process. Look at the corner between the therapist and the client. What is the contract between the therapist and the client? Because there's a contract, a specific contract between the therapist and the client, for example, about a disorder or a behavior or a difficulty. Okay.
Fabiola,
yes.
Sorry, can I stop you for a moment?
Yes.
And just to maybe offer to people who are not maybe in TA,
yes.
or for those maybe who are not so much, to remind what do we mean by contract?
Okay. An explicit agreement about the goal, the working process, and the goal of this working process. We work to do what together? This is the contract. This is one of the main concepts in TA. So, what are the expectations of the therapist and of the client in this process? What will be the commitment of the therapist and of the client in this process? And what kind of influence can the therapist have on the client and vice versa? The client on the therapist. Can you see the complexity? This is not only a triangle, because sometimes I have heard someone saying, "Oh, the three-cornered contract, just a triangle." This is not just a triangle. It's a complex model. Look at this relation between the therapist and the parents, because there's also a contract between the therapist and the parents to help the client, the son or the daughter. What is the contract between the therapist and the family? What are the expectations of the therapist and of the parents, of the therapist on the parents and vice versa? What will be the commitment of the therapist in helping parents and vice versa? And what kind of influence can the parents have on the therapist and vice versa? And the same, you can analyze this piece when seeing the triangle on the side of the clients and the parents. What is the contract between parents and the client? The contract is not only between the therapists. What are the expectations of the parents and of the client on the client? And what will be the commitment of the parents and of the client? What kind of influence can parents have on the client and vice versa? It's not rare to find parents that are manipulated by sons or daughters. And you can extend this model to the school, for example, if there's a commitment with the school, if there's a commitment, a difficulty with the school. Okay. How do you feel? This is not just a triangle. Can you see the difference in working with an adult? A question for you. Is it clear? Okay. Feel free to ask questions or comment in the chat. So, the importance of an equal distance is fundamental. Let's see the possible mistakes in this triangle. We could find the first situation that I have described in the previous slide, an exclusive alliance relationship between the therapist and the boy. So with the brief distance and the big distance between, for example, the therapist and parents, and the client and parents. Can you see that this situation could become an exclusion of parents? of the process, from the process, and this is really dangerous, because parents can influence and can enter in the process in a destructive way if excluded from the process. If we find this kind of situation, we have to think about what we are devaluating in the process. According to my experience, many therapies fail because of this, or therapies stop because of this, because there's not a good consideration, a good an appropriate involvement of the other part of the process. Other possibilities, you can easily understand how this situation can be dangerous and destructive for the therapy. An alliance between the client, the adolescents, and parents against the therapist. It could be like, this could be very, you can find this situation, for example, in families that play a game like I catch you, so finding for an enemy in their life. Another possible situation that can be dangerous in working with this complexity is an alliance between the therapist and the parents, and a big distance between the parents and the therapist from the boy, from the girl. Sometimes against the boy and the girls. Okay. I normally close webinars with keywords to be used in your work, just to some key concepts to that you can remind and can keep in your mind. When working with adolescents, remember to establish clear contracts, also through the triangle. When you work with the adolescents, remind yourself that you are working with the big complexity. And you have to consider this complexity involving some important parts of this process. Remember that when working with adolescents, boundaries are fundamental more than other settings. Imagine what could happen if you find a self-harming behaviors or dangerous behaviors or a depressive mood in your client. You need to establish clear boundaries.
Fabiola, can I
Yes.
interrupt you? Amalia wrote a comment. And
Yeah.
I think that boundary issue is just related to her comment.
Yes.
Well, a question actually. She says, what about the situation when the closest relationship is between parents and the therapist?
Yes, it could be something a sort of mutual projections. Okay, so the therapist accept this projection of for example, an idealization of the therapist against evaluating the adolescent. It's really dangerous. It's really dangerous. The therapist needs to be careful about this process. Many times parents try to establish this kind of relationship, trying to use the therapeutic setting like a tribunal. Oh, he's doing like this. He doesn't attend school. He's a positive. Is always angry, and they try to establish a symbiotic relationship with the therapist against unconsciously. This is an unconscious community, an unconscious relationship, an unconscious dynamic. Did I answer?
Yes.
I think Amalia needs.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I'm also, can I just offer another example of this close relationship between parent and the therapist that comes to my mind? Is when the parents actually need a therapy themselves. So talking about their own issues instead of focusing on the contracted themes regarding the adolescent problems of why they are there. So I'm thinking also about
it could be
a needy parent who takes the space for themselves and their own emotional issues.
And a therapist, in that case, a therapist needs to be clear about the setting. That, for example, meetings for, because when working with adolescents, you need to organize regular meetings with parents to discuss the situation, to have their feedback, to give them feedback, and you need to be clear about this setting. This is not their therapy. This is a space to help them, to help the client. Okay? Otherwise, we can enter in a game, and we know that behind the game there's a symbiotic relationship.
Yes,
okay,
of course.
Yes, other questions?
Maybe I can have a follow-up question. I know my students sometimes and supervisee who work with adolescents also think about, and that is how often do you work with parents? How, in a technical terms and organizational terms, how do you do it? How often? Like, is it once per month, every 2 weeks?
It depends. It depends on the situation. So if there's a severe situation with symptoms or a disorder, I normally meet them every free session with the client. So it depends on the situation, but generally after 4 or 5 individual session with the clients, I meet the parents.
Okay. I have 2 more questions for you, Fabiola, in chat. Martina asks, can you recommend where they can read more about this?
About yes, many things are into Italian, or they are not in English, but I think that you can, if you read the article by Fanita English, you can have many information, interested and useful information. And yes, I can recommend you to read Françoise Dolto books. They are international now. about. In TA, we have few material, few things.
Martina says, thank you. And Doris asks, what about if the parents of the adolescent are divorced and one of the parent plays games against therapy and others participates in the game?
Okay.
This can affect the three-corner contract. What can we do about it as a therapist?
Okay, in this case, that are not rare, unfortunately, I used to meet the single parents in the session. I used to meet him or her in a single session, asking if the situation is severe, asking, recommending personal psychotherapy. So, of course, if the parents doesn't help the process and obstacle the process, we have to confront it. I had a very severe situation like this with parents that were divorced in a very bad way, legal conflicts, and of course the boy the boy was suffering a lot. And I spent lots of time of my time, lots of session meeting the father in this case, because he was the problem that the person who couldn't collaborate at the beginning of the process, but at the end we found some results. Okay, did I answer?
Doris did not respond. Thank you. She says thank you now. Thank you, Doris. Yeah.
And of course, what I want to say, just to conclude, this is a creativity work, but also flexible. When working with adolescents, we can't imagine a rigid and punctual and regular path. We need to work with different piece of work. So take into consideration this and be ready. This is a wonderful work, working with adolescents, I think, but this is my opinion. And so thank you very much for your attention. I think that I have said. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Fabiola. We have only a few minutes left, so maybe we can see, is there any additional comments? Martina says that it was inspirational for her. She thanks you, and Tanya as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for coming.
Yeah. So, yeah, if there is no more questions or comments left to further discuss about the topic, we are just right on time. And I also want to say big thank you, Fabiola, for doing this once again. I also think that people can have additional thinking about how important it is to have clear contracts and to answer all those questions you listed, and to be mindful, is there some change in the process? Because as you stated in the beginning, it is unstable developmental stage for the adolescents, so we can expect some instability in our processes.
Of course.
Well, yeah.
So, good work with adolescents.
Thank you once again. I wish you all a very good evening and a rest, to have a good rest for the night. Fabiola, we will see and hear in
Bye-bye.
some other moments.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.